Welcome to Cafe Europa. This is our last Cafe Europa of 2024, and we're really happy to have you join us. I am Rob McFarland. I'm the coordinator of European Studies here at the Kennedy Center, and we are really, really grateful to keep being able to put on this Cafe Europa series, and we're thrilled to take it in a French direction and have a French connection going on today. And so I would like to introduce our group today. The discussion is going to be moderated and joined by Corey Cropper, who is the Associate Dean of Humanities, despite what the poster said, and we apologize for the good-natured ribbing. Huh?
You weren't manifesting?
I was not making any predictions on right now the College of Humanities is replacing their dean, and his came out as dean, and somebody may have thought that as a coup d'etat, but it was not meant as that.
Why not? Why not?
So we're really grateful for, one of the things I want to say about Corey Cropper is that he has, this won't mean a lot to you students, but to any of us who are faculty, Corey is a savant when it comes to rank and status, meaning who gets tenure and how you go through and review people's tenure things, in such a way that I have been in the room where people have seen what Corey does and everyone turns and says, oh, wait, we need to do that too. We in this college need to do that too. BYU is a different place and a much, much saner place for professors, thanks to his really great work with rank and status and with advancement. And I really appreciate him not only as a friend, but as a really exceptional leader. Carter Charles used to be with the Department of Religion, and we are so fortunate to count him as ours in the College of Humanities. He's come and joined the Department of French, and brings with him all sorts of really, really great insights. He's going to be leading a study abroad coming up soon to Italy and France, and it is going to be a phenomenal program based around spirituality and religion and the religious experience. And so this is something that I really, really...
Still taking applicants.
They're still taking applicants. You can stay here in Provo. I'm not sure why so many people insist that they have to do that. There's money, there's everything, and there's Professor Charles, who's going to France and Italy this year. And then there is Professor Yvonne Lebras, who has known me since I was 12 years old, had a great effect on my family, and with his generosity, he basically raised one of my sisters with his daughters, and has always been a really, really great example of somebody who believes strongly in the beauty of French culture and strongly in the beauty of the gospel. And I'm really, really grateful to have these gentlemen here teaching with us today. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn the time over to them to give us a little bit of a discussion about recent French politics. Would you join me in welcoming the members of the French department, and as they catch us up with France? Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rob. When you call me a savant, I think of, yeah, exactly. I think of Rain Man or something. But yeah, I'm going to start by just giving a little bit of background to what we want to talk about, which is Macron, the political situation in France, especially what happened this summer. I was fortunate enough to be there. Were you still there too, Carter? So we were in France when this all went down. But I want to just give you a little bit of a sense of who the players are, what some of the background is, and then we will we'll launch into a conversation about it. The one thing that is really important to understand is that in France, the French president has different and a lot more powers than the American president. And just a little background on this. This grows in right after World War II. France had a parliamentary government, the Fourth Republic, and it was modeled on the Third Republic that was also parliamentary government that ran from 1870 all the way up until the beginning of World War II. The problem, and it's actually a great system, but the problem, of course, is that in the face of crisis, if a parliament is divided at all, it's hard to make big decisions. So if you notice up here, I've got Algeria on here. The Algerian War was this inflection point in French history when de Gaulle who had been the general during World War II of the French freed troops. He was invited to come back into government, to take the reins of government, and he helped to elaborate a new constitution, the Fifth Republic. And over time, the president had more powers, got more powers so that he, and it's always been to this point a man in France, could resolve constitutional crises and national problems. So here are some of the differences. The president in France is elected, unlike in the U.S. where the president's elected indirectly through these the Electoral College. The French president always gets a majority of votes, and you know that in the U.S. that hasn't happened. It hasn't happened every time, especially in recent memory. So there's a little bit more weight and authority accorded to the president thanks to that voting system. The president's also elected for a longer term, 5 years. It was 7 until the Chirac administration, and they reduced it to 5 at that point. The president also has the authority to appoint the prime minister and to work with the prime minister to appoint all the government officials, and can change the government whenever he or she one day wants. And then the other thing, can you imagine if the president of the United States could dissolve Congress? That's effectively what the president of France can do. Now, the president of France, like the American president, also is the head of the commander-in-chief of the military, and there are other powers that are pretty similar. But these are some of the authorities that are different. And this,
some president would love to be able to fire Congress.
that's true. Fire Congress. We won't name names, but the French president can do that, and that's what Macron did this year. So just a little bit of a timeline leading up to what we want to talk about. On the 9th of June this summer, France held European parliamentary elections. So these are elections to decide who goes to Strasbourg and to represent France and the different regions of France in the European Parliament. And you can see the results here. These are preliminary results that were published on the day of the election, and that led to Macron taking a very quick decision that very evening. But you see that the Rassemblement National, Jordan Bardella, we'll come back to that, but this is the far-right party. And if you look up here too, you can see this, the second from the bottom, Reconquête, is also a far-right party, maybe even farther right. They're different, right? They're both far-right parties. So the far right had the plurality of voices in this European election. One thing you have to understand about the European elections, or the elections for the European Parliament, is that in France they always vote. It's always a protest vote. They're rarely voting about what the future of Europe or the direction they want to see Europe go. They're voting as a referendum on the current administration in France. And we do this too, right? A lot of times in Utah, we might vote for who's governor or who we're voting for our state senate or something, based on some other or bigger issues. So it's not a great comparison, but we often have national things in mind. We're voting locally. In France, when they're voting on the European level, it's usually local politics or French politics that are top of mind.
Yeah, I was going to say it was also a small number of voters. I mean, less than 50%, of course.
Yeah, so the participation rate or the vote was pretty low. But given and Macron's party is the second one on the list, the Renaissance, Modem, Horizon, UDI. That's the centrist coalition called Ensemble now, which means together. So the president's party came in second, and then you see a couple of the Parti Socialiste and La France Insoumise are two left-wing parties that came in collectively combined ahead of the centrist party. So Macron sees this, and he decides he wants to call the bluff of his own people, of the French elect voters. And that night, he decides to dissolve the National Assembly. His idea being, okay, you voted for the far right. I want to see if you, and we'll talk about why he did this a little more, but I want to call your bluff. I want to see if you really support the far right, or if this was just a protest vote. So guess what? Now this parliamentary election that we're going to hold will test that if you're willing to put your money where your mouth is, essentially, from this European vote.
Yeah, it's interesting to know that he made the decision without consulting the prime minister. So you can imagine,
Yeah.
dissolving the National Assembly without consulting.
And it was the same day as the election results came in from the European election. So the first round of voting, now here's something interesting. We just finished an election cycle in the US that took forever. In France, you can only run campaign ads for 2 weeks before an election. I'm a big fan of that, by the way.
And it's a lot cheaper too.
And the expenses are a lot lower, and you just aren't bombarded by it. But so he announces he dissolves the National Assembly on June 9th. By the end of the month is the first round of elections. Kind of like the primaries, but not quite. Every party is on the list, and you can see the results I put up here. The Macron's party is the orange. Oh, it did not. Hang on. There we go.
Yeah, that's better. One more.
Yeah, you've got to.
One more.
I'm advancing them on my own computer. I don't know why you can't all see that, but here we go.
Oh, okay.
So this is Macron's party is the orange here. This is the far right or the right. This is the far right and the far left, essentially. And this led to, let me show you the political cartoon that my colleague found. This is the former Prime Minister.
You took forward. So hit that.
Yes, thank you. This is a former Prime Minister here on this side, and Macron, the caricature of Macron in the middle, and she's explaining that the far right and the far left are going up, and he's saying at the same time, which means that the results from his party are going down, so that orange slice in the middle. So he had, anyway, we'll get back to that. Okay. So 2 weeks later, they held the final round, or a week later, they had the final round of the election. So what they do in France is any candidate who gets over 12.5% qualifies for the final round, and then it's the top vote getter in that final round that wins the seat for the parliamentary election. And so you can see that his party picked up between, if you look at what his party had projected after the first round, and then here the second round, he did do better than the initial expectations, but you can still see that he doesn't have anywhere near a majority, the centrist party, Macron's party. And that the party that has the most votes, as you can see, is the left. And so the left came out right away, and they said, we should be voting, we should win this, we should be, the prime minister should come from the left. But Macron, shortly after the second round of the election, said, we're going to wait. And he asked his then-serving prime minister, Gabriel Attal, to remain prime minister until after the Olympics. So he essentially decided hey, the Olympics are a big deal, we're just going to put all this on hold. And it was a way to delay and keep some semblance of order and control over what was happening in the National Assembly. So then the Olympics happened, everybody's happy, France wins a bunch of medals, including the bronze and the silver in the men's road cycling race, very important. And then
I have to say why it's very
well, it's important because I'm a fan.
Yeah.
I like to bike. Then finally, not until September, Macron eventually names a prime minister, but from the center-right party. So if we go back to this screen, you see the 66 votes over here. That's the center-right party, Les Républicains, and that's where he decided to choose the prime minister from. And effectively, what he did is create a coalition with the far right, the center-right, and the center against the left. They were afraid of the economic policies of the left, which we can get into if you all are interested.
So you need to mention that the prime minister, his name is Michel Barnier, he's the one who negotiated the Brexit. When was it? 20.
Whenever Brexit
Anyway.
was, 2016.
So he's, he's really used to difficult situations and negotiations.
So here, these are the people that we'll be talking about here and that you might want to ask questions about. Michel Barnier, Emmanuel Macron, of course, the president, who's in a second term as president. Gabriel Attal was the prime minister, youngest prime minister in French history.
Yeah, 36, I think.
You're moving on your computer again.
Okay.
Gabriel Attal, there he is. Jordan Bardella, who emerged as he's one of the leaders of the far right.
In fact, he's the leader right now. Official leader.
Yeah, and then
He's only 28.
he's also young. Marine Le Pen, another leader, who's former presidential candidate of the far right. The party is called Le Rassemblement National. So the idea of nationalism and nationality and a certain idea of France is baked into that. Mathilde Panot is a leader of one of the leaders of the far left, along with Jean-Luc Mélenchon. His party is called La France Insoumise. Help me translate that, Carter.
So it's very difficult.
French.
Non-submitted,
that won't
non-compromised
submit,
France.
Yeah. There
So
we go.
very
So-
far left.
Jean-Luc Mélenchon has been in the political scene for
Yeah.
decades. A couple other things just to give a little background on this is that back particularly in Macron's first term, there was a popular movement against Macron called les Gilets jaunes, the yellow vests. Everybody in France has a yellow vest in your car. If you have to stop on the side of the road, by law you have to put on a yellow vest. So just like we all have a jack and a spare tire, they all have that plus a yellow vest. So people wore these yellow vests as a form of protest against economic policy and tax policy, among other things, and general dissatisfaction with Macron. He nevertheless won re-election, but some of those protests continued in other ways, notably after there was a reform, or the retirement age, to put it simply, was raised, and that caused some consternation.
Yeah, from 62 to 64.
Yeah, by a couple of years. And so protests continued, and other protests like farmers, some of you may have seen this on social media, they would drive truckloads of manure into town and dump it in front of the mayor's office, or fill McDonald's with it, or whatever, these kinds of clever...
They don't slice people's head anymore, but they do such things in France.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
But it's going on as we speak. There is another protest right now, very similar to the yellow vest. The farmers are very upset.
And the farmer, yeah. And one last, let me, okay, so this is the
Retraite.
Reform,
of
pension reform.
retirement reform. But the 49.3 is a special law that Macron's government used, even though they didn't have a majority, to force some bills through, and that caused a lot of consternation as well. So, with that background, I thought we would go from there and talk about what led up to this, what might happen going forward, and what the different stakes are in French politics right now, and what that means for Europe more generally. And maybe Carter and Yvon, we could start with this. What in your mind contributed to Macron's decision? Why did he decide so quickly to dissolve the National Assembly? What was he hoping to gain, and what were the results?
Does he know himself why? I mean, as I said, he didn't even consult his prime minister. So, but I mean, there is a lot of reasons, I guess. But last time we talked about it, you said maybe it was a coup d'état,
Yeah.
We
Like
looked for a translation, remember?
Yeah, like a sudden impetuous decision,
Yeah.
almost like
He lost
flight
it.
of fancy. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
If that's okay, perhaps I can specify a little bit, give more about 49.3 for our students along the lines of what you started doing, Corey. After Macron basically came out of the 2022 presidential election, having lost about 8% of universal popular suffrage from his first election. And he lost his majority in the National Assembly. He named
the absolute majority.
The absolute majority in the Assembly. Basically, the absolute majority in French politics is the ability basically to pass laws without needing votes from other parties. You need 289 votes out of 577 members in the National Assembly. Okay. In his first election, he had that easily. In French political system, legislative elections follow immediately after the presidential election, which basically creates a momentum for the president to have a majority, except that in 2022, he did not have that absolute majority. And so in the French Constitution, as Professor Cropper just explained, there is a device, one article, having learned that from the Fourth Republic Constitution, that allows the government to pass all budget laws basically without needing to debate, the kind of filibustering we have in the U.S. Senate. To avoid debates and amendments, you can actually basically, as the Prime Minister say, I place the responsibility of my government on the table by invoking Article 49, Paragraph 3 of the Constitution. It shuts down all debates and the law is considered as passed. Macron's government, well, the governments in his second mandate basically had to do that down to Gabriel Attal. Okay. And this is generally viewed as an anti-democratic device, but it's actually very democratic. But overall, Macron finds himself in his second term without the ability to kind of do everything that he wanted. So in my estimation, why did he call, well, he just basically saw that it was a downward movement for him. The European election did not brighten the horizon for him. So he decided that he would play it all, basically, go all in by calling elections. But that was also very impetuous on his part. Indeed, his prime minister learned about it less actually than 24 hours before. Mm-hmm. The thing that you need to know is that in the French political system, the legislatives are led by the prime minister and the outgoing prime minister to remain in power, and whatever party wins the election, whoever is the leader of that party wins the prime ministership, basically. Yeah.
The president appoints the prime minister, but the prime minister has to have the support of the National Assembly.
Right. And so the man who is supposed to basically lead the campaign did not know that he was going to have a major campaign to run immediately, basically in the wake of the European election. And so this is also why we're still wondering why Macron called us, dissolved the assembly to call elections. Most people believe that on the right and on the left, really, since he took pretty much everyone by surprise, most people believe that he just wanted to throw the reins of the country into the hands of the far right, because the chances are that they were going to win that elections were it not for another item that you probably need to understand in the French political system. Between the two rounds, if you find yourself in the third position, basically three candidates can make it to the third round if they have 12%, 12.5%. So if you are, for instance, a right, center, or left candidate, but you are in third position, basically you have 12.5, 13, 15%, and you look at the mass and you realize that, well, it's very unlikely that you will win the deputyship, the representativeship,
The seat, yeah.
basically. And so what you will do in order to avoid a far-right candidate winning the seat, you will basically drop out to allow someone from the more traditional Republican side of things to win the seat. And so that's what a lot of the left candidates did, which kind of reduced the number of far-right deputies in the National Assembly.
So, yeah, personally, I believe Macron had this in mind, because it's not the first time that the national rally or Rassemblement National has been around. If you go back to 2002, we had the presidential election between Chirac at the time and Le Pen, who is also the founder of the National Front or Rassemblement National. Chirac won by 82%
over
of the
80%,
votes.
yeah.
Why? Just what you said. In other words, all the parties, in fact, in spite of the fact that they did not like Chirac, they decided to unite for Chirac against the National Front. So this is not new. It happened in 2002, it happened in 2017, and I think Macron, in a way, thought about it. He said, okay, maybe I'll get enough seats.
He believed that people would again vote with a nose pin, or with a cloth pin. Is that what you call it?
Holding
Holding their nose,
Holding their
basically, to
noses,
vote
yeah.
for the right. So he assumed that people on the left would be voting again for his party, because when he was elected the first time, most of the people who voted for him were actually people of the center and the left. Because guess what? Macron is coming from the left. He was François Hollande's Minister of the Economy until he decided to break from traditional political protocols and run his own campaign and things like that.
Yeah, and he won.
And he won, yeah.
Yeah, he was able
because people wanted a change.
He was able to get rid of the traditional left, traditional right,
Right.
and created his own party, which was, of course, the majority.
Which would never have worked in the United States, by the way.
Yeah. And,
It's pretty amazing that he was a centrist was able to win in a national election. And you look, but what happened is he essentially took all the energy out of the center right and the center left, the big parties, the Socialist Party on the left, and it's called Les Républicains now, LR. It's been called many other things over the years. Those were the two big
traditional
parties.
right parties.
And the president, like Hollande, the president before Macron was a socialist. Before that, it was Sarkozy from the center right, and that had been the case for the whole life of the Fifth Republic.
But,
and
but
so,
Macron was able to,
yeah,
to
but
control.
it kind of killed those two and
Yeah.
created these extremes
Yeah.
on both sides. So you've got a far left,
true.
La France Insoumise on the left, and the
But
Rassemblement
I
National
remember
on
in
the right.
2017, we were invited to go to the KSL radio station.
Yeah,
Remember?
yeah.
And I was very pleased because I'm a centrist personally. And I said, oh, Macron, finally we have someone from the center. And
Is Macron a centrist, or has the political landscape in France changed? To me, for instance, Jacques Chirac was center-right, but Macron, Sarkozy after him is outright right.
Yeah.
And then Macron is more center-right, right of center than anything.
Economically.
Yeah.
economically.
But socially, he's probably more center-left. That's how I understand.
With the reform of retirement plans in France, a lot of people began to question his social leanings in that regard.
Especially with the Article 49.3.
I'm thinking of mariage pour tous. These types of laws. Around marriage and abortion and so on.
Okay.
He tends to be more left.
Maybe.
A little bit.
But anyway, so he had the majority in 2017. After the last elections, his party is almost gone. Just a few seats left. In fact, he's losing his people every day as we speak. I mean, he lost his leadership among his own party.
Yeah.
Don't you think so?
In some ways, if you, I don't know, you probably wanted to move us to
Well,
another
I
question,
wondered, now with, he selected a prime minister from this group of 66 here on the right, Michel Barnier. How is the National Assembly functioning? Is it healthy? Is it working? Is it going in the direction Macron wants it to go?
Not very well. But you have to understand, for many, many years, we had in France a majority in the National Assembly and the opposition. Okay, so it was like a two-party system in a way. And now we have, as you can see, how many blocks. I mean, it's hard to talk about parties. I mean, groups of parties.
Yeah, they're groups of parties.
So you have three. Mm-hmm. This is the first time in French history that we have something like that. In many other countries like Belgium and maybe Germany, the politicians work and create coalitions. In France we are not used to coalitions. I mean, we belong to a party. You are in the majority. You are in the opposition. So this is really really difficult to handle. So the Prime Minister is trying to work on the budget for 2025, and there is a good chance that he's going to fail because he has no support from anybody.
Yeah, it's so every day I read the news in France, just like I read the news in the United States, but like several times a day, and every time I am looking forward to finding a situation where the prime minister has been and his government has been censored. In French politics, when the government is censored, that means they're just fired. That means government is overthrown by the National Assembly, and that is the president needs to name a different prime minister. The only party that is holding Barnier in place and that has kind of led to a sort of de facto coalition is the far right. In fact, Barnier is the prime minister because the far right wanted him. And right now, they're questioning his government hinges on this. If the budget does not take too much away or from purchasing power, then they will vote the budget. But for now, we need also to say that the budget has passed a first round and it's not been approved. This is where the Senate actually is weighing, and for now, the Senate is really the ones that's trying to fine-tune the budget to return it to the National Assembly for a final vote. But his government hangs on this. He can again invoke Article 49, paragraph 3 to pass it by force, basically. And if it does, it's very likely that the far right will support a motion against the government. And this has been discussed actually in the past few days.
So in other words, Macron created chaos.
He did.
I think he did.
Yes.
Now, one thing, the far...
He created chaos, and he further legitimized the far right in France.
Yeah.
This nationalist party, the far right, it's called Rassemblement National, or the National Rally. It was for years called the National Front, the Front National.
Very nationalistic.
And it was born in the 1980s, right around the time that Europe and the idea of a European... There was a European Union before this for certain goods.
European Commission.
Coal, steel, certain economic things. But when there was talk of creating the euro and creating a European economy that would be shared, that's about the time, too, that the National Assembly, the Front National, this far-right party, was formed. And it was pretty small at the beginning. The other factors...
So anti-EU, right?
Anti-EU. It also was about changing demographics with the second generation. In the 1950s, France, economic growth, and they needed laborers. So they brought in a lot of people from colonies in northern Africa. And so you have the second generation now that's coming to political power, and so the National Front coalesces to combat Europe and to combat immigration, essentially.
Yeah.
I'm simplifying here, but
Right.
that's more or less the detail outline. And they usually will get, they were practically, there were almost no seats at all for many years
Yeah.
in the National Assembly, zero. They were constantly outmaneuvered by the other parties. But in the last decade or so, they've gotten not only seats, but as you can see, they have nearly the second largest group in the National Assembly. And when you mentioned before, Chirac ran against Jean-Marie Le Pen and got over 80% of the vote in the presidential election, the runoff. But when Macron beat Marine Le Pen, Jean-Marie Le Pen's daughter, it was
really-
not by, it was what, it was even not even 60?
Very, very close.
It was close.
So there is a good chance next time.
So the far right continues to grow, and I wonder if you think that will continue,
Oh, yeah.
or do you think the left will grow, or will the center be able to maintain any kind of governing voice?
Right now the wind is blowing with the far right, and with a new, especially with a new leader. They have a leader, Jordan, what is his name again?
Bardella.
He's only 28 or 29 years old. He just wrote a book. He has no experience except in this political party, but he's young, and a lot of young people are beginning to get into the party. So the way it's going, of course, Macron is out of the game. He cannot be a candidate anymore. So yeah, look at this party as the party of the next president of France. I mean, I make a prediction. Maybe I'm not allowed to do that, but
Well, we can. If we look at the electoral returns, the votes, as you've mentioned, beginning in 2002, when Jean-Marie Le Pen, who is the founder of the National Front, father of Marine Le Pen, who actually did the Algerian War, and there is also some evidence that he carried out torture and created this party that was very xenophobic.
yeah.
When he ran into
anti-Semitic,
anti-Semitic, and
He's been found guilty. In French, freedom of speech laws are different. They're maybe more anti-hate laws. So Jean-Marie Le Pen had numerous times denied the Holocaust, for example, and he was fined.
but you have to understand they changed the name of the party to make it more acceptable.
right.
They don't talk about
Right. So if we look at the dynamics, 2002, his score was 16.9%. In the last presidential election, his daughter had 41.5%.
Yeah.
The dynamics are such that it's very, very likely that the next president of France will either be Marine Le Pen or will be coming from the far right. This for several reasons. The renaming of the party, with the renaming come a lot of efforts to tone down, to silence the most extreme, most xenophobic side of the party. Second, there is the fact that the French political system, like most political system everywhere, works on some sort of lordship, barony basis in such a way that in order for young people to emerge in such political systems, they really need to be hardworking. So if you look at the traditional parties, it's difficult for young people to emerge. However, on the far right, it's easier. Bardella is young, but he is...
And Marion.
Yeah.
Marion Maréchal Le Pen.
Maréchal Le Pen.
Yes. It's easier for young people to have a political career in new parties and things like that. And this has been very attractive also to young voters who... I have friends in France during those elections who used to be center right or center left, who are telling me, who told me during the recent legislatives that they're comfortable voting for the far right because it's no longer the party
Yeah.
that it used to be.
More and more people, including
Yes.
including my brother, to tell you the truth.
Yes. So it's become a very normalized party, and so the chances are that if they're not if they don't have the presidency, they will very likely have the control of the National Assembly because people are disappointed in traditional politics.
Yeah. It's time for questions.
Okay, I wanted to open it up, because this is the cafe, we're sitting here, we're chatting, they're arguing, disagreeing, agreeing, building off of each other. That's the way we like to do this Cafe Europa experience. But we would like to open it up for questions. If you have a question, raise your hand, and Adelie will bring you the microphone, and we'll take care of it. So we have a 1 and a 2. And so, and they may each respond to it or whatever, we're not sure how long this will go. But let me tell you, we're going to set out, now his name is Emmanuel Macron, but we are setting out some macarons, because it kind of sounds like it, for you. If everybody will take a macaron as you're out there by our Cafe Europa sign and pick up one on your way out. But you're welcome to leave, you're welcome to grab a macaron if you need to head to class, but we want to open up the floor for some discussion.
And well, one other nugget or idea too is that what France is experiencing is similar to a lot of other countries,
Yeah,
kind of
that's
rise in populism.
That's what I was going to say.
and so on.
In Europe right now, I mean, you see countries after countries, Belgium, Holland,
We have the
Germany.
flow of migrants or refugees from the Middle East and
very
from
similar
Africa.
to very similar to the U.S.
So
really.
it's kind of happening globally. Go ahead.
Hello,
Oh.
my name is Roy Madison. It's a pleasure to be here. What would you say, obviously with the United States' last election, and obviously elections around the globe shifting more right, what do you think those on the left need to change about their policies? Obviously, as we've kind of seen, right, the right kind of revolt, but do you think it's more systemic and more of a disrespect to incumbency rather than a move to the right?
Yeah, I think it's more a move to the right. There is this disrespect. I mean, the French, when you look at in the U.S., if you have a president whose favorability ratings are below 40%, everybody's like, oh, it's terrible. In France, they're routinely below 20%.
Yeah.
So it's a national pastime to complain about the incumbent. That said, my colleague just mentioned it's been consistently getting more and more, the far right has been more and more popular regardless of who has been the president. So that trend, I think, will likely continue. What the left, the problem the left has, talking to friends in France, is that their economic platform would blow up the system, essentially. This is the fear of people in the center and the right. And that fear of a complete overhaul, like an anti-capitalist, anti-free market penchant on the far left, scares people more to the far right. So it's a very different system. What I'm saying here applies to France, but and so I think the left in France needs to adopt a little bit more pro-liberal, and when I say liberal, I'm talking about economic pro-liberal policies, like the old Socialist Party, ironically, I know, but that the way that they did it in order to draw people from the center. I wouldn't dare to advise the left in the U.S.
But the left in the left in France is very divided. We have many parties, and they don't agree with each other. They fight each other all the time.
Yeah, there's an anti-capitalist party.
You have a communist party. You have
Macron, Mélenchon, I showed you, wants to get rid of the Fifth Republic, move to the Sixth Republic. So people are concerned about that much change.
But the right is more united. I mean, if you look at the right, the Républicains, the Rassemblement National, I mean, they are willing to work together. But I would say it's mostly the immigration situation in France and in Europe that, of course, the right have solutions, or at least they propose a few solutions. The left don't. So, I mean, doesn't.
Yeah.
So I think it's a question of unity.
There are some more questions here. We could probably...
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Bonjour, comment ça va?
Très bien. Oh, en français, finalement.
Je parle un peu. So I wanted to ask about les gilets jaunes.
Les gilets jaunes.
Les
yeah.
gilets jaunes.
Uh-huh.
The and so that movement and other movements, but mainly that, like those demonstrations and stuff, were they kind of coming from either the left or the right, or was it kind of like a working class populist type
Yeah,
thing?
it came from nowhere. I mean, even the left
Yeah.
was surprised. So it was, how do you say that in English?
Grassroots.
Grassroots, yeah, it was a grassroots
popular
movement. And they started to block, all the roads, the freeways, and then it was spreading. It's just like, in fact, if you watch the news today, that's what's going on with the farmers today.
Yeah, what's interesting in France, they have a tradition of doing this too. France is very geographically centralized. The quickest way to get from here to here in France is to go up to Paris and back down.
Yeah.
And so everything goes through Paris, and so going back to the revolution and before, for that matter, there's this tradition of popular uprisings that influence and topple governments.
Yeah.
And so my colleague and I, we teach
You
this
can call me
contemporary.
Yvon.
Yvon, I know, but I want to be respectful in front of.
Oh, okay.
Mon cher professeur, doctor, when Halloween was first introduced in France, trick-or-treaters, instead of knocking on doors and saying, "Can I have candy?" they would get together and go through the streets yelling, "Give us candy! Give us candy!" like a manifestation, they call it,
Demonstration.
a demonstration, yeah, manifestation. So this is kind of where the Gilets jaunes, and then it was inchoate in the sense that you couldn't. People had different demands. It wasn't like a centralized organization saying we want A, B, and C. Some of them wanted increased minimum wage. Others wanted lower taxes on fuel. Others wanted lower retirement age. It was kind of all over the map.
Yeah.
Different policies with regard to Europe.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get some more questions and make Carter answer it.
I could have answered the others, but
Of course.
Of course.
You would have done better than I did.
You said that the National Rally tends to be anti-European Union.
Not
used to be.
Not right now. I mean, they don't speak about it anymore.
Okay.
But deep down, they are.
They used to be.
So my question is, what effects on international and European politics do you foresee this trend to the right causing in the next decade and a half?
Yeah, that's it. Go ahead.
You really want to make me answer that one.
Yeah.
So they used to be anti-European until they realized that, hey, they can get support from Meloni, for instance, get support from Viktor Orban, for instance, and point to those far-right movements in power. And in fact, they actually have coalitions at the European Union to work together. And so they've changed their rhetoric a little bit on Europe and things like that, although you do have an undercurrent of national sovereignty that's there. But it is not as powerful as in the early 20s.
In fact, I was going to say Marine Le Pen, she is a deputy in the European National Assembly.
Right.
So
And right now she has some problems, as you know.
yes, with some legal issues.
Yeah, she paid some assistance, and they instead of working in the parliament, they were doing something else. So she may be in trouble for the next presidential election.
The motto of the old Front National was "La France aux Français," France for the French. And that might remind you of something. They've changed it since, but that was the old. What other questions? Yeah.
This is more of a clarifying question, but for I guess is the way that Macron basically lost it backfired on his plan backfired on him. Was it because he tried to help his own party in the by the South in the National Assembly, but that actually made more support go to the right?
Let's see. I mean, he was able to keep some of his the seats in the National Assembly. So, I mean, he lost, yes, but he's still around. And so I don't think he was planning everything. but at least the results of the second round are not so bad.
Yeah,
So
I do think he was thinking, I've lost a mandate here. The results of the European election have shown that. I want to see how serious it is, and let's let the voice of the people decide which direction we should go to some extent. That's a charitable reading of it,
And then
Yeah.
and it backfired because people like started going more towards the right.
and the
Yeah,
left.
yeah.
Just like-
If I can add one more thing here, Macron is, like most people in power, he is very egotistic, self-centered. He likes to be in control of things.
But
And-
he's not anymore.
He's still the president.
Yeah, but I mean,
He decided to name the prime minister he wanted.
okay.
Right. But overall, and you know, he decided to run as a presidential candidate also because he wanted to be front and center. And so calling the elections was also a way for him to say that he is still in control and he is the president. And in France, the president is indeed very powerful, as my colleague Corey Cropper said it. So he is still around, even though if the National Assembly were to, you know, vote a motion against the government, he still gets to name the prime minister. So
Yeah. But still, he's you know.
And if you have any other questions, we'll invite you to come up here and talk to our panelists.
Okay.
And sit down and, you know, and at the cafe table and chat with them. I did get the question, what is the difference between Macron and a macaron? And that the idea is one of them is kind of full of air and only for the rich people, and the other is a cookie.
that was good.